She was only meant to look after him for a single day, a rainy afternoon, an urgent plea, a boy who hadn't uttered a word since his mother's passing. Isabella, a cleaner's daughter, arrived with a soaked jacket and weary eyes, but a simple old lullaby was all it took for something to shift. Young Noah, so withdrawn, leaned his head on her shoulder, and Ethan, his millionaire father, watched in silence, unaware that this unassuming young woman would ultimately redefine everything he believed about love, sorrow, and fresh beginning. The rain fell softly, yet persistently, as Isabella's phone vibrated for the third time that morning. It was a distraught woman on the other end. The nanny had cancelled last minute. "It's just for today, you don't need to do much, just stay with him until tomorrow. We pay well, please." Isabella hesitated. She didn't know the family, nor even the address, but the money would cover one of her mother's medications. Half an hour later, she stood before a sprawling mansion with automated gates and a garden that resembled a painting. The stern housekeeper opened the door. "He's in the room upstairs. Doesn't speak much. Ever since his mother, you just need to ensure he stays safe." Isabella nodded. Opening the bedroom door, she expected cries, shouts. Instead, she found silence. A small boy, motionless, gazing out the window as if awaiting someone who would never return. Isabella had always possessed small yet resolute hands. She learned early on to care. For the house, for her mother, for absence. As a child, she'd accompany her mother cleaning luxury high-rises, observing the polite quiet of elevators and families who seemed to inhabit another universe. She never quite acclimated, but she never complained either. When her mother fell ill, Isabella left her studies and began cleaning on her own. At night, she mended clothes for neighbors in exchange for rice, soap, or fleeting moments of peace. The old blue-covered notebook, tucked deep in her bag, was her sole sanctuary. Inside were the tunes she'd learned from her mother, simple lyrics that always worked with the children she occasionally cared for at the neighborhood shelters. Isabella never harbored grand ambitions, but she held a quiet wish: to sing for children, to be a comforting presence even without promising that everything would be all right. In the hushed room, she didn't rush to approach him. She sat on the floor, near the bookshelf. The boy, Noah, didn't even glance at her. His eyes were sunken, his body too slight for such profound quiet. The plate of cookies beside him remained untouched. Isabella slowly opened her notebook and began to sing. Softly, almost like sharing a secret, the melody spoke of trees enduring the wind, of mothers cradling from afar, of windows that would one day open. Isabella didn't expect a response. She sang for herself. But, on the second verse, Noah turned his face. He said nothing. He simply looked at her. Then he rose and walked to her with small steps, settling beside her. Isabella didn't speak. She just kept singing. He rested his head on her arm, and in that tiny, simple gesture, she felt something hard to articulate. It was as if that boy, without a single word, had entrusted her with his heart, and she accepted it. Outside the door, a man in a dark suit watched the scene with clenched fists. Ethan Montgomery had no idea who this simply dressed young woman was, but seeing his son so close, so tranquil, something in his meticulously ordered world began to waver. And it was there, in that room with closed windows, that everything began to unravel. What Isabella felt that afternoon was something she had never experienced. Not even on the best days of her childhood. The boy's silence beside her wasn't empty. It was presence. And for the first time in years, she felt needed in a way that didn't hurt. Not as a cleaner, not as a daughter caring for her mother, but as someone seen entirely for who she was. Noah stayed with her the entire time. They played with cloth dolls, invented stories about clouds they saw through the window, and by late afternoon he fell asleep with his head in her lap. Isabella sang a slow song, one for mending invisible wounds. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, Ethan watched from a distance, a businessman who trusted spreadsheets more than people, and who now felt exposed before a stranger with a gentle voice. At the end of the day, the housekeeper handed her an envelope with payment. "We didn't expect him to let anyone near him. You did something no one has managed in months." Isabella hesitated. The money was far more than she earned in an entire day of cleaning. She thought of refusing, but the image of her mother coughing at night, wrapped in a thin blanket, weighed too heavily. She accepted the envelope with a shy nod. "It was just for today," she murmured, and she left the mansion without leaving her name, without asking for anything more. From the top of the staircase, Ethan observed her. She didn't look back, but he remained there still, feeling something within him he couldn't name. A crack, perhaps. Later, entering his son's room, Ethan found him holding a small blue notebook against his chest, the one Isabella had forgotten. On the cover, handmade drawings and letters worn by time. The boy slept peacefully for the first time in a long while. That night, Ethan didn't work. He ignored meetings, silenced notifications. He sat in his office and flipped through the notebook Isabella had left behind. Lullabies, loose notes, scribbled verses, simple things, yet full of soul. He didn't know why, but it moved him in a way no financial report ever had. The next morning, he tried to discover who she was. He asked the housekeeper. All he learned was a referral from a former laundry employee, nothing but a first name, Isabella. Ethan closed his eyes. He felt foolish for caring so much about someone who had been in his house for only a few hours, but he also knew she had left a mark, and that bothered him more than he cared to admit. Isabella returned to the boarding house where she lived as one returns from a beautiful dream that shouldn't have been dreamt. The room smelled of mold. The mattress was thin. Her mother, lying beside a basin of warm water, breathed with difficulty. "Was today good?" she asked in a weak voice. Isabella lied with a tired smile. "It was just a small job, Mom. Nothing special." But inside, everything within her was in turmoil. She couldn't stop thinking about Noah, about his eyes slowly opening when she sang, about the way he leaned his head on her arm without fear, about the feeling, as strange as it was comforting, of being needed by someone who asked nothing in return. In the days that followed, Isabella declined other jobs. She told no one about the mansion, about the boy, or about the father who had watched her in silence. Something about that experience touched her so deeply that speaking of it felt like a desecration. But silence didn't protect her. Her mother's fever rose, the medications ran out, and mending neighbors' clothes barely paid a few coins. At night, Isabella would sit by the window, hugging her own body as if holding the shards of a vase she couldn't let fall. Across town, Ethan watched his son's regression with growing anguish. Noah grew quieter each day. He rejected new caregivers, ignored toys, didn't sleep properly, and always clutched Isabella's blue notebook, the one she'd forgotten, as if it were a sacred relic. Ethan, who had always controlled everything, now found himself powerless. The pain of losing his wife had already shattered him internally. But watching his son slowly fade, unable to do anything, that was something else entirely, a subtle cruelty that no contract could reverse. On the morning of the fourth day, he rose earlier than usual and called his assistant. "I need you to find this woman, Isabella. She cared for Noah on Friday. She's in her 20s. Start in the poorer areas, clinics, schools, daycares. I need to find her." Isabella, meanwhile, was washing clothes in a communal laundry room in the neighborhood. Her hands red from the soap, her eyes burning with fatigue. Her mother had had a terrible night. The cough was drier, the fever more stubborn. As she rinsed dishcloths, she felt a presence standing behind her. She turned with the bucket in her hands, and her heart nearly stopped. Ethan, there in a suit, but without arrogance, just present. His eyes fixed on her, as if he didn't know what to say. Isabella froze. The concrete floor beneath her feet seemed to melt. Part of her wanted to run. Another part wanted to stay. "How did you find me?" she murmured, barely disguising her surprise. "Noah, he hasn't spoken to anyone since you left. He sleeps with your notebook every night. You left something here, and I couldn't ignore it." Isabella bit her lower lip, trying to control the tremor in her hands. "I just sang. It was just one day. It was enough." His voice was low, but firm. "I want you to come back, not as an employee, just as you are." She took a step back. The smell of soap on her fingers, the distant sound of a siren, everything told her that world wasn't for her. "I can't. My mother, she needs me. I can help," he said without hesitation. "I don't want charity," she cut in firmly, her eyes welling up. Ethan inhaled slowly. "It's not charity. It's gratitude." The silence that followed stung them both. Isabella gripped the bucket so tightly her fingers whitened. "I need to think," he nodded, respecting her space. "Think. But know this isn't just help. It's a chance. For all of us." And he left, leaving Isabella there, in the middle of the laundry room, with wet feet, a burning face, and a heart more restless than ever. Have you ever had to decline something you deeply desired, just because you felt it wasn't for you, just because pride or fear spoke louder? If this scene also tugged at your chest, write "I understand" in the comments. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching her mother breathe with difficulty. The room was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the curtain gaps. She thought of everything, of what she felt when Noah hugged her, of what Ethan said, of the way he looked at her, not judging but seeing. Her mother woke in the middle of the night, drenched in a cold sweat. Isabella rushed to change the compress and prepared a tea with the last chamomile sachets she had. "You're different," her mother murmured, her voice hoarse. Ever since that day, Isabella didn't reply. She stood with her back turned, stirring the tea slowly. She wanted to speak, but didn't know where to begin. "He showed up today," she finally said. "The boy's father. He came to the laundry." Her mother coughed softly and nodded. "And what did he want?" "For me to come back. He said it wasn't charity, that it was gratitude, but I'm scared." "Scared of what, daughter? Of getting used to it, of wanting too much, of forgetting who I am." Her mother extended her thin hand and gently held hers. "Daughter, those who care too much for others often forget that they also need care, and accepting help isn't selling yourself short. It's allowing someone to truly see you." Isabella swallowed hard. She had never heard that said in such a way, as if it were permissible to want something more, as if she also deserved it. The next morning, still sleep-deprived, she picked up her phone and slowly dialed the number Ethan had left on the note. His voice on the other end was low, controlled, almost surprised. "Ethan, I thought about what you said. If the offer still stands, I can come back for a few days, just to help Noah. Nothing permanent." On the other end, he took a deep breath. "It still stands, yes. He'll be happy. But don't promise me anything. I'm not ready for promises." "All right," he replied. "No promises, just presence." Isabella hung up and stared at her phone for a few seconds. For the first time in a long time, she wanted to try. The mansion gate opened with the same soft sound as before, but everything felt different. Isabella's heart raced as she ascended the entrance steps. The house was the same, but she was no longer. The housekeeper greeted her with a knowing, almost conspiratorial smile. "He hasn't slept properly since you left." Isabella simply nodded. "I came for him, only for him." She climbed the stairs slowly. Arriving at the bedroom door, she didn't need to knock. Noah was sitting on the floor, the blue notebook still clutched to his chest. When he saw her, he sprang up and ran to her, wrapping his arms tightly around her legs. "You came back," he whispered. She knelt down, holding his small body against her chest. "I promised, didn't I?" He nodded, and in that instant, no explanation was needed. The following hours passed like a whisper. They returned to drawing on the porch floor, inventing stories with forgotten toys. Isabella sang softly while he built pillow forts. Late in the afternoon, when Ethan discreetly walked by the corridor and saw them together, her hair simply tied back, sitting on the floor, smiling, he said nothing. He merely observed. The silence he once feared now seemed to have a different texture, Later, as Noah slept peacefully, Isabella ran her fingers over the pages of the forgotten notebook. It wasn't just paper. It was memory. And somehow, that boy had made her a part of his story. And she no longer wanted to pretend it didn't matter. That night, Isabella barely slept. The guest room was spacious, comfortable, but her body was slow to adjust to the soft mattress. She was there, but still didn't feel she belonged. The next morning, she went down for breakfast. A cup was set out for her. She hesitated before sitting. Ethan appeared shortly after, not in a suit but a dark wool sweater. He seemed more human. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "More or less," she replied, stirring her tea. "I want to help you with your mother," he said directly. Isabella looked up with a contained start. "You don't have to do that. It's not out of pity, it's gratitude." She tightened her fingers on the rim of the cup. "Gratitude is shown with words, not paid bills." "Do you think I'm trying to buy you?" he asked calmly. She didn't answer immediately. She averted her gaze to the window. "I think people like you learn to solve everything with money, and I come from a place where all we have are each other. When someone offers too much, you learn to be suspicious." Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I lost my wife in a senseless accident. Since then, I stopped trusting, even myself." Isabella felt her throat tighten. She didn't respond. She just nodded. That was more than she expected to hear. She went back up to the room with slow steps. The boy was asleep. The house was silent. And for the first time, she wondered, what if I'm not ruining anything by agreeing to stay? It was raining heavily that afternoon when Isabella's phone vibrated. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor from the room next door at the boarding house. "Isabella, I'm sorry to call you like this, but your mother had a crisis. I took her to the hospital. She's stable now, but she needs you." The floor seemed to give way beneath her feet. She rushed upstairs to the room where Noah was playing with wooden blocks. She knelt before him. "Noah, I have to go. Grandma's not well, but I'll be back, okay?" He squeezed her hand tightly. "Promise?" Isabella swallowed hard. "I promise." She went downstairs with hurried steps. In the hall, Ethan saw her grab her backpack. "What happened?" "My mother. She got worse. She's in the hospital." "I'll go with you," he said, already grabbing his coat. "No," she cut him off quickly. "It's my responsibility. It doesn't have to be yours alone." She stared at him, her gaze torn between anger and gratitude. "But if I stay, maybe she'll think I left her behind." Ethan nodded. "And if you go, maybe Noah will think you're never coming back." Isabella stood motionless for a second, between two worlds, one that always demanded her strength, and another that offered solace. "I'll be back," she finally said, her voice choked. "I just need to take care of her now. Afterward, we'll see." And she left, carrying the rain on her shoulders and a piece of Ethan's and Noah's heart. In the hospital, the room was too cold. Isabella held her mother's hand as she did when she was a child during power outages. Her mother slept, but she didn't. She thought of everything, of the boy who smiled again, of the man who began to lower his guard, of the woman she was becoming, without asking permission. The next day, waking up in the armchair, Isabella found a small box on the nightstand. Inside, a handwritten note. "It's not charity, it's care. E." Beside it, a card with a doctor's name, clinic address, and a scheduled appointment. Her mother continued to sleep, but now there was another chance. Late in the afternoon, Isabella took the subway. She arrived at the mansion without warning. Her hair was tied back, her face tired, and the blue notebook in her hands. When the gate opened, Noah ran down the stairs. "You came back?" he shouted. Isabella knelt and hugged him. "I promised, remember?" Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked at him without flinching. "I was scared," she said, "of losing myself, of depending, of not knowing what to do with this feeling that has grown here." "I was too," he replied. "Still am, but you came back, and that says it all." She nodded. "I have no promises," Isabella added, "only presence." "That's all I ask," he said. And that night, Noah slept in her lap, as if the whole world had finally found its proper place. Time didn't stand still. But for the first time, Isabella felt she could walk without rushing. The house was no longer a silent mansion. It was a home in the process of rebuilding. Noah's footsteps echoed through the corridors. The windows remained open even with the wind, and the garden blossomed with more colors than before. Isabella divided her days between invented stories, chamomile tea, and the new routine of caring for someone, without forgetting herself. Her mother continued treatment, supported by the clinic Ethan recommended. Stable, medicated, and insisting on the phone. "Stay, my daughter. It's not abandonment. It's love, in a different way." On the porch, Isabella wrote in her old notebook. Snippets of stories, mixed memories, names of trees. Noah approached and pointed to a blank page. "Is this one mine?" "It is," she said, "but only if you want to draw your world in it." He laughed and ran to get his pencils. Later, Ethan sat beside her, as he did more and more often. He brought 2 cups of tea and no hurry. "How is she?" he asked. "Better. For the first time I see my mother sleep, without pain." "And you?" Isabella took a moment before responding. "For the first time, I'm not fighting against everything all the time." They were silent for a moment. There was no urgency, no explanations, just the soft rustle of leaves, the sound of Noah counting stars in the backyard, and the quiet comfort of a presence that demanded nothing. As dusk fell, the boy appeared with dirt-stained hands. "Is it time to plant?" Isabella nodded, surprised. He ran to the sapling they had set aside days earlier. The 3 of them knelt in the garden, she, Ethan, and Noah. They planted together in silence, like planting hope, without promising eternity. "Will it grow?" the boy asked. "It will," Isabella said, "because it was planted with what matters most." "What?" She looked at Ethan and smiled. "Presence." And on that ordinary afternoon, smelling of wet earth and hands intertwined over the roots of something new, Isabella understood. She didn't need to choose between the past and the future. She could simply stay. Isabella always believed the world was made for those who knew how to ask, for those who spoke loudly and took up space. She wasn't like that. She spent her entire life trying not to be a burden, shrinking herself to fit the needs of others. But now, something had shifted. She was still a caregiver, still a daughter, still a woman of few words. But for the first time, she understood that she deserved more than crumbs of affection. She didn't need to prove she was strong all the time. She could indeed be a foundation, but also a sanctuary. She could be a presence, and not just a rescue. On the last page of the blue notebook, she wrote a simple sentence: "I didn't leave. I was just waiting for someone to see me." And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of the story. Great deeds aren't necessary to change a destiny. Sometimes everything begins with a song sung in a silent room, with a gaze that sees beyond appearances, with the courage to accept a gesture without fear of appearing weak. Because when someone is truly seen, something inside reorganizes. And no matter how much time has passed, or how many times life has said no, a single sincere connection is enough for the yes to finally find its place. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever thought that caring for others was your only role, this story is for you. You also deserve to be cared for. You also deserve to stay. If this story moved you in any way, leave a like. It shows that it's worth continuing to write stories that truly touch people. And I love knowing who's on the other side of the screen. Tell me in the comments, which city or country are you watching from right now? If you believe in the power of healing stories, subscribe to the channel. Every new subscription is what gives me the strength to continue. And don't leave yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've left on the screen and come with me to the next video. I'll meet you there.